This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, your daily recap of the information that affects Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning team of Dustin Hoffman, Riley Smith, and Mark Magnuson. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Dustin Hoffman.
Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Hoffman. It was WASDE Day today, and we're going to take a look at how those numbers affected the market, and boy, in corn did they. We'll talk with Sam Trainor later on of agmarket.net, but first, we're going to hear from Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig and his Iowa Farm Act. He likens it to a state-level farm bill that needs to be as diverse as the ag industry is in this state. We're here on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network and talking today with Iowa Ag Secretary Mike Naig. And Secretary, we're here to talk about some new legislation you're helping to introduce called the Iowa Farm Act. Let's talk about that. And first of all, Secretary, thanks for taking the time to visit with us today.
Hey, Dustin, good to catch up and Happy New Year to you. Yes, we're launching into 2026 and of course, the legislative session here in Iowa is getting ready to ramp up next week. And so we did introduce here just this week, we're talking about the concept of an Iowa Farm Act, which is, you can very much think of it as akin to a farm bill type concept. We've actually seen this used as a vehicle in other states successfully to move kind of a broad array of ag policy pieces together. And we thought it was time to maybe try that here in the state of Iowa. There's a lot of ag related legislation that passes in a given year. But what this is attempting to do is to really pull together kind of what I actually like about it is it represents the kind of the diverse array of the sectors that are in Iowa ag. For instance, we've got a provision that will affect beekeepers and specialty crop producers. It'll support our livestock producers. It'll support our row crop producers and agribusinesses as well. So there's really something for nearly everybody in here. And of course, the concept is bring some focus to it, talk about an ag package. It's a vehicle for other ag-related measures to be attached to it and really do something that's positive for our ag community, certainly at a time when we need all the help we can get and the stability that we can get.
And you mentioned beekeepers, and also I noticed there was a provision for Christmas tree farms in there.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll start with some of those economic opportunities. It's really addressing a lot of things that we see as far as agritourism and also products under the Grow Iowa program, giving them some of the same benefits that the mainstream agriculture industry enjoys.
Right. So let's be clear. I mean, a provision that eliminates sales tax on the purchase of bees is not a big ticket item, but I tell you what, it matters to people who are in the business of selling bees to other beekeepers. And so that's maybe one of the best examples. Oh, and the Christmas tree provision too. It's increasing some or clarifying some protections, some liability protections for when people are visiting a Christmas tree farm out there cutting trees. There's some obvious hazards that exist on a farm, and you know it's clarifying liability responsibility there in those circumstances. But those are two great examples of, now if those bills had to be introduced on their own, and they have been actually at different times, the beekeeper piece has, they're little provisions. Sometimes they just get lost in the shuffle, but when you put them together, some little items, some big items together, then you can move things as a package. But I will tell you this, and the origin of the bill itself even is, and these two are good examples of this, these came directly from a visit that I made, separate visits that I made throughout the year. I visit all 99 counties, and you know, we're not just putting miles on the car and pumping E15 into or unleaded 88 into the tank, right? We're out there listening and visiting and learning and trying to hear what are the challenges. So these are two examples of things. I was on a Christmas tree farm. I was at a beekeeper business, and these issues came up. We said, we can do something about this. And so you can kind of go through the whole bill, and there are going to be pieces that have a direct tie back to either a grower association, an industry association, or an Iowan that I visited with throughout the last year. And we said, we can put that into a broader Farm Act bill.
You know, and it's interesting you brought that up. I mean, obviously you do listen to what those producers are needing and wanting, and that goes across the whole spectrum of agriculture, as you said. But like you also mentioned in the beginning, it's almost like its own state level farm bill.
Yeah.
And, you know, to hear that kind of information, I mean, like you said, a lot of this stuff maybe standalone gets lost in the shuffle, but how much more attention does this get in the legislature when you introduce something like this on a level like this that's more broad? I mean, it helps everybody from corn and soybeans, like you said, to poultry producers, beef, dairy, all the way down to honeybees, Christmas trees. And I shouldn't say down to, but all the way across to.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a wide spectrum of industry. I mean, you've even got backing from the propane industry in the state. I mean, there's a lot of support for this, and again, coming from a lot of things that has been barriers or maybe just slow steps for some of these producers to get things done.
That's exactly right. And so again, we get the benefit then of having this coalition of industry sectors and representatives that'll come together and work on this bill. There's value in them working together on something in a unified way, of course. Now, the other piece that I really like about it is it allows us, you and I are talking about this. I've been doing lots of interviews about this. I'm getting text messages from folks across the state saying, hey, it's about time we had a Farm Act, a piece of legislation. Hey, put me in, coach. I'm ready to go help. Things like that, where I just think people are encouraged by the fact that there's an effort being put forward. And again, there will be ag legislation that moves outside of this bill. Don't you worry about that. I know that there's other pieces that will happen, and legislators are working on their own priorities. But what we wanted to do was bring a focus on this set of issues, and it allows us to then talk about it, elevate those things, and get some attention for ag and farm policy in the state of Iowa. The other thing that we're trying, and again, I mentioned it, I think that this is a concept that's been used in some other states. We've seen it work successfully. I'd like to do this periodically. I don't know if this happens every year. Maybe it does. Maybe it happens every couple years. But what we want to be able to do is get in the routine habit of having a farm act where we have an opportunity to gather together. What do we always like to say? The only constant in agriculture is change. Well, we need to change policies to accommodate for those things that are happening as well. So it's the start of something I really hope can be effective over the course of time. But within this bill this year, there are some very important provisions here that we want to see get across the line.
Yeah, and I was noting some of them is tax reform issues, obviously help for supporting beginning farmers, which is going to be important for keeping this industry going in this state, and all the way down to biosecurity and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. So, some of these tax provisions, and of course, there's the mechanics of working through budgets and tax policy in the legislature is that those have to then go through different committees. And we've had good conversations. And here's the other thing I know for sure: there's gonna be a healthy conversation around property tax reform in the state of Iowa. So it's very possible that some of the provisions that are in our bill end up in other bills. But that's the legislative process. What we want to do is raise these things. Some fairness issues, cutting that sales tax. There's a grain excise tax that generates about $1 million, that ultimately gets passed on to farmers. We think that is ripe for eliminating that. There's some bringing fairness to how retirement income for retired farmers are treated and what kind of business structures, as corporations, estates, trusts, those types of things that they may have. They may have proactively set up to take advantage of Iowa law to be able to pass things to the next generation, to be able to operate effectively. We just want to make sure there's some fairness there. And that's why, again, you put these into a package where we can get the attention that we need and move them forward. We've got great support. I have to say, from the Speaker of the House, Pat Grassley, who's a farmer, Majority Leader Klimish, committee leadership. We've had a lot of support, and we've been consulting heavily with them throughout the process. So again, we're anxious to get into this and see where we can get through see what we can get across the line by the end of the session.
I guess the last thing that really stood out for me in this list of what you want in this bill was the fact there's even some efficiency maneuvers for the department itself. And that's something you don't always see in a legislative bill like that, is to try to improve the work you guys are doing and how you're doing it.
Absolutely. We keep an eye to that. We keep a sharp eye to that here at the department all the time. And look, it's the theme across the state of Iowa, frankly, across Iowa state government, is how can we gain efficiencies, streamline. So we're always looking to do those things here at the department as well. We need to operate in a fiscally responsible way. And so that's what we're trying to do. There's some technical pieces in here and some things like that. And then there's some bigger swaths. But again, the point being that we want to look at economic opportunity. We want to keep the tax base low in the, we keep taxes low in the state of Iowa. We want to look at that workforce. We want to look at biosecurity. And you mentioned it, but we're going to also be really trying to grow and continue to lean into that Choose Iowa program that we have for Iowa grown, Iowa made, Iowa raised. And by the way, that's one of those topics where we have 300 Choose Iowa members across the state. And there's some really interesting things that start to happen when you're growing apples and then you want to process apples, and some things that pop up around zoning and taxation and some of those types of things. So the more of that activity that we see in the state of Iowa, which we're investing in heavily, the more issues that then might have to be addressed or barriers that we need to clear. So another great example of a good feedback loop. We're growing that segment of our economy. What are the then challenges or the policies that need to be changed or embraced to accommodate for that growth? So those are the types of things that we're certainly keeping an eye to.
Well, obviously, there's so much of this bill, Secretary, that we could be talking forever on this, all morning even. But if folks want to see more about what's in this bill, what kind of provisions you guys are looking for, where can they find information on that?
Yeah, you bet. Of course, we're finalizing language now, working through that process, but certainly iowaagriculture.gov is the best place to track along with anything that we're working on. But certainly updates and provisions related to this Iowa Farm Act will be there. And I think you'll be hearing more about it as we move through the legislative session. Again, I just want to appreciate all the input that's been provided from farmers, from Iowans, from ag groups, from industry associations, from legislators, as we put this package together. And I'm excited to see where we can get to.
Well, we're at the end of the trading day, and it was a big day and not exactly what we expected. And we're talking with Sam Trainor right now of agmarket.net. Sam, all the numbers came out for the USDA's estimates for what we planted and or what we should say harvested in 2025. Big report. We've been anticipating it for weeks, and boy, it was a surprise, and not in a good sense.
Not in the lightest, no. Big left hook here from the USDA. I think it caught just about everybody by surprise. It was pretty standard across the entire industry that corn yields were going to come down. The biggest question was just by how much. They were sitting at 186 national corn yield. Our internal estimate here at Ag Market was 182.5 bushel per acre. Well, we were dead wrong. They actually increased corn yield, went up to 186.5 bushel per acre. And the thing that was probably the most frustrating, more so than the yield number, was the planted acreage number. We saw an increase in planted acreage once again. Just very frustrating, considering that producers are required to put that information into the FSA data or FSA office by July 15th and no later than that, required to do so. And so you would think by August and at the latest September, we should have a very good grasp on what our planted acreage are. But since July, we have added 4.5 million acres of corn on this balance sheet over the series of reports that we've seen since then. So very frustrating, and just makes these markets very difficult to navigate for these producers who, we've come to get to a situation where it's hard to trust some of these numbers that we're given here, because numbers that we feel should be concrete continue to change throughout the year.
And that's an interesting way of putting it. I was thinking that it's going to be, and for the nicest way of saying it, leave farmers scratching their heads as to where those numbers came from. But it was really a shock. I know the market really has just been plummeting on corn here since. Soybeans, how did they fare in this report?
Soybeans actually fared very well, in my opinion. Now, granted, I say that they finished the day down 10 to 12 cents. But when you look at corn being down 24 cents, I think soybeans hung in there really well and kind of did what they needed to, especially from a technical standpoint. You look at the corn chart, and there's just nothing good to be said there. I mean, it's the biggest bar we've had up or down here in multiple years, and unfortunately, it was to the downside. So, not much support to be found there. However, in the soybeans, we held intact a support line that's been there for quite some time. If you would have told me coming into today that we had a bearish report and soybeans were down 10 to 12, I don't think I would be very, very surprised. And, I don't think that it's very detrimental here. The big detriment to the commodity markets today was certainly seen in the corn markets, but maybe a little bit of optimism seeing is that soybeans came off their lows quite substantially here, about 6 to 7 cents off the lows in the soybean market, and held in some key chart support. So if there is a silver lining in all of this, I would say it's that. And then two additionally, a bit unrelated, but talking about silver linings, I do think that is something that we could look at in the corn market, seeing this sharp decline in futures price, I think you're going to have to see some basis increases across the country here because farmers are just not going to want to get rid of this corn here at $4 or lower. And we've already been experiencing some basis pushes around the area. And I expect that to be expedited now, especially after losing 25 cents on the flat price today.
Okay, then moving over to the livestock side of things, cattle and hogs, how did they come out today?
Cattle and hogs kind of took a backseat to a otherwise very saturated news day in the commodity markets, but nonetheless, cattle did finish a little bit higher, and hogs were down about $1. But overall, very quiet trade in those markets today, as seems like all the focus was on the corn and bean and wheat markets, and then additionally, I know it's not very evident or pertinent to your listeners here, but that silver and gold market, those metals just continue to just skyrocket here. Silver up almost $7 again today. Gold up over $125. So it sounds like a lot of the managed money or the equity funds, if you will, are putting their money in those metal markets here versus the cattle, like they have been, for the last 12 to 18 months. It seems like everybody wanted to own cattle here due to some fundamental stories starting to appear that maybe some of that money shifting into the metals industry.
All right. Well, today was a great example of why you want to make sure you've got strategies in place when you have market shifts like this. If folks want to have these discussions, look at some of the intel you guys are watching and some of the things you guys are looking for, what's the best way to start that conversation?
Best way would be just give us a phone call here in Normal. Myself, Kurt, Ethan, or Kayla, any of us would be happy to help out here. 1-800-779-1515. Otherwise, you can visit us online at agmarket.net.
All right. Sam Trainor of agmarket.net's been with us here today. Sam, thanks so much for the insight. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Again, was Sam Trainor of agmarket.net. Let's go ahead and take a look at the closing numbers on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network market screen. At the close, March corn was down 24 1/4 at 421 1/2. Soybeans for March down 13 1/2 at 10.49 even. Soybean meal down $5.40 at 298.30. Soy oil up 58 cents at 50.27. Chicago wheat down 6 at 511 1/4. Kansas winter wheat down 3 1/2 at 526 3/4. Kansas spring wheat down 4 at 556 even. Minneapolis spring wheat down 1 3/4 at 565 3/4. And oats down a dime at 293 1/2. On the Merc, live cattle up $1.52 at 235.25. Feeders were up $1.32 at 362.05. Lean hogs down 87 cents at 84.42. Pork cutouts unchanged at 93.75, and Class 3 milk 7 cents lower at 14.79. And that's been a check of the closing markets, and that brings us to the end of today's show. Find all our content online at iowaagnet.com, as well as follow us on Facebook, X, and our YouTube channel. From the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network studios in Des Moines, I'm Dustin Huffman. For Riley Smith and Mark Magnuson, we thank you for watching. This is Ag Matters PM.